Okay, the first question here, how do we properly differentiate between trusting God's will and not being passive in our lives?
That's a good question. All right, just to give a little bit of a disclaimer here, normally as I kind of just referenced in the video we just did, I always want to try to know the person. So the advice I'm going to give here on any of these questions will be fairly generic. I would give much more specific guidance if I knew the person, if it was the person before me. So I just want to make sure that's clear, because these factors do contribute, right? Like somebody maybe has a particular problem they're struggling, which would alter how I would present the answer to that. So just want to be clear. So you may have other factors that you're dealing with in answering this question that need to be taken account of. All right. So with that in mind, the simplest probably rule for that is what St. Augustine said, which is pray like everything depends on God and work like everything depends on you. Okay. So there is a synergy between God's will and our will, and we have to do everything we can, while understanding that the results are going to be up to God. So kind of rephrase that in a different way. As far as like discerning, because the discernment in this too, right? Like that's part of the problem, right? To look at some of the complexities of this. We don't always know that we're doing God's will, right? That's part of the problem. So that passivity can come from, well, is this what I'm supposed to be doing or not? So realistically, the discernment kind of always leads this question, have you prayed sufficiently? Have you talked to your spiritual father? Have you, put in the time to figure it out the best you can, utilizing your natural reason or whatever tools that God has given you to do so? And the other thing that comes into this is understanding that, there are multiple courses that could be God's will. Like that's a kind of a hard thing to come to terms with. It's going to be a long time to understand that. But sometimes you choose this course, well, then that's God's will. You choose this course, that's God's will. Like God will work with it either way, right? The time that doesn't come into play is if it's something that's, of course, inherently sinful. Then that's not something we should pursue. But presuming it's not inherently sinful, we have options. God gives us free will, and we can choose to go one way or the other. So I think, we pursue, once we decide that this seems to be the best course, right, for, of course, our salvation and fulfillment of our duties and these kinds of factors that come into play, then from there, put in the work. Yeah, you have to give the necessary effort, but with the one caveat that we don't get attached to the results. This is the key point. Where people go wrong so often on this is, and this is very much an American problem, maybe just a Western society problem, but we have this idea that failure is not an option, right? We grow up with this idea. And I mean, I'm for myself, with all the things that I've done in my life, you can't say, oh, well, this or that. Nobody's going to accept excuses, right? But the truth of the matter is we don't rule reality. We don't rule the world. And, best case scenario, we might be able to control our own actions to some degree, but we don't control everybody else's. So the key is, I guess, once again, is put in the full effort, obviously after prayer, and of course pray while you're doing it, and continue living this Orthodox life the way it's supposed to be lived. And, but also understand, but with the understanding that God's will be done, and a complete acceptance if things don't work out the way that we intended, like being okay with that. And I think you'll find, even in the natural world, there's an acknowledgement of this kind of detachment being valuable. There's a very colloquial book, which I won't mention the name of, but I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, that capitalizes on this truth, right? That things that we're not so obsessed about tend to go better, right? And if this fits within our mode of understanding, as Christians, that the results are up to God. We put forth the effort, but ultimately the results are up to God. And if we have an expectation that they're going to go a certain way, this might sound pretty radical, but if you think about it, I think you'll find that it's true, is that if we have an expectation, then we're almost idolatrizing our ideas, right? It's almost a form of idolatry, because we are saying, right, if we're going to be disappointed, I have this idea of what's supposed to happen, that thing doesn't happen, and now I'm upset about it, right? What am I really doing? I am saying, I know better than you, God. I know this is supposed to happen because my mind told me this is a good thing, right? So I'm essentially putting my idea of reality above that reality itself, or what I think, my will above God's will. So it's always important to go into something with complete resignation to divine providence, to God's will, to it not working out. If somebody can do that, put forth the effort and be okay with it not working out, then they're starting to work out on the right road. So everybody does, you do your part and let God do his part, essentially, whatever that is. And you might find last piece on this. You might find that, as often happens, that what you intended doesn't work out. But in a relatively short time, you understand why it didn't work out, and what did work out is much better, right? That's faith. That's trust in God's will, in divine providence, because we don't know everything, right? We can't do everything, and we don't know everything. So,
How to know the difference between pride and confidence? When is your confidence too far?
yeah, I think that's going to kind of come back a bit to my last answer is confidence. It's going to sound paradoxical, but confidence should actually be based in humility. And let me explain what I mean by that. Because humility, once again, is a proper assessment of what we are and what we can do. And so confidence should be based on competence, right? So if somebody is good at something, they shouldn't pretend like they're not good at it, right? That's false humility. It's actually can be a species of pride. So, if we work hard at something and we get good at it, we're not supposed to pretend like we're not. The key is that we shouldn't take pride in that, or we shouldn't allow it to become an opportunity to have us think more of ourselves than we are, right? Once again, humility is essentially truth, that's seeing ourselves as we are, as God sees us. And so therefore, if we have a skill, if God has given us the ability and the opportunity to gain a certain skill, then we should use that to his glory, right? We shouldn't pretend like it's not there, but we shouldn't also, once again, hoard it to ourselves like it's ours and get puffed up over it, right? God gave us that ability. Had it not been him giving us our existence, giving us the opportunities to cultivate that and the talent to be able to acquire that skill, we could never do it. And I think as long as somebody's clear about that, then they can operate within it. If somebody compliments you, the reality of it is we don't have, we don't have to make a big show of it either. It just honestly shouldn't register. Like when somebody gives me a compliment, I'm just, okay, whatever. Like it doesn't mean anything to me because I know that whatever good I do is from God anyway. So as long as we see things in that context, and don't, once again, hoard it for ourselves somehow, then it should be fine. Anything beyond that is prideful, is an unhealthy confidence, a confidence that's, or what people sometimes do is they try to build themselves up, right? They tell themselves they're really great, or they can, let's see, if you believe it, it is, all this kind of, this kind of ridiculousness. You can either do the thing or you can't do the thing. And sometimes, our even higher level is our confidence, should be in Christ. Like if it's something we have to do and we don't feel like we can do, but we need to do it, then we just pray to God for that strength, right? Ultimately, God can affect miracles, so it happens sometimes where we're put in a situation that's way beyond us. I can tell you I've been so many situations in my own life where I'm like, wow, this is way beyond me to do. But God carried me through it, I didn't have the confidence, but I knew it's something I needed to do, and I stuck it out, and I persevered through it, and God made it work out. So that's kind of the other side of that too.
How can you practice orthodoxy when there isn't a church near you?
Yeah, I can speak to that too from experience. So when I worked overseas, I was still doing that for about a year and a half. No, I guess it was more than that. It was 2.5 years that I would, I'd be gone for 2 to 3 months at a time. And so yeah, when you're not able to attend services regularly, you have to make the best of your time. So all the things we've talked about in terms of living the Orthodox life, those all have to be done in greater measure. Your margin of error is much more narrow. You have less support from not being able to receive the sacraments, so you have to, kind of like a person if they go blind, how their other senses get more enhanced. You kind of have to do the same thing with all the other practices of the Orthodox life. Obviously we have examples of saints who lived in the desert for years. It's certainly, we have the tools. Somebody should never, of course, willfully separate themselves from the sacraments without some kind of special blessing to do that. But for those people, and I know there's many that do just find themselves in a situation like that for one reason or another, it's really important to just do what you can. If possible, to have a relationship with a priest, that you can talk to on the phone, ideally. Some priests, some jurisdictions will do confession over the phone too. If somebody is, obviously already Orthodox, they can receive guidance and even absolution over the phone. Not every priest or jurisdiction does that, but some do. That's just, I just found for myself, like the game got more serious when I would not have access to the sacraments. I had to really, really step it up and make sure I didn't fail on my daily prayers. It's like the pressure, you're holding more weight, it's easier to have your knees buckle, right? So you have to really keep your form, your posture good, so to speak. And then of course, as much as possible, sometimes maybe it's just a matter of, once a month, if you can't just make the drive. I've regularly lived more than an hour away from church. It's not hour 15, hour 20 minutes. There's people who've driven further than that. So it can definitely be done, at least once a month or something, just to keep that connection if possible.
Father, how should I as an Orthodox Christian deal with despondency or feeling a lack of motivation or focus during the services? Is this normal? What are some tips to rekindle the zealous flame? Thank you.
Yeah, so these are really good questions. This is one that I would like to know more about him. I'll try to answer it in a general way, but this is a good example of a question that honestly, I would want to know this individual before I gave very specific advice, because I'm sure there's specific things going on, right? One point I'll just make kind of in general, another difference between Orthodoxy and other faiths perhaps is that we really try to get to the root cause. When somebody comes to me for confession, I'm not so concerned about the specifics of the sin itself, beyond the fact that they give me an indication as to what's going on in regards to cause. That's what I'm more concerned about, is the cause of the sin. We want to uproot causes. So it's not this divine balance sheet, right, in the economy of justice, and we're trying to figure out how many, weights to put on there to balance it out and penances and all that. That's not our approach. Our approach is try to figure out what's leading this person to sin in the first place, get to the root of that, and then help that, person or guide that person by grace to uproot that. So anyway, within that context, I would say that despondency is a problem that many, many people struggle with today, clearly. And I think it largely has to do with the fact that our culture is so toxic. There are so many unwholesome elements and ways that we were raised. Once again, not knowing this individual, I don't know what specific things are going on there, but just in general, people have bad families. They grow up in rough families, dysfunctional families. They, work meaningless jobs. They're surrounded by, negative news, just the list goes on and on. There's a lot to be despondent about if your focus is on earthly cares, on worldly things. So the simple answer, the general answer that would kind of underlie all of them is that we have to we have to shift our orientation away from these things that pull us down and elevate them to the higher things. Father Seraphim Rose talks a lot about that, about that elevation and the necessity for that. Of course, he's one of the one of the experts on this subject. But in a simple way, let go. Don't concern yourself as much as possible. Try to look beyond. In the military, we have this concept of assaulting through the ambush. Right? When you're being tempted this way, this is an ambush. This is an ambush of sorts. There's negative elements that the devil then utilizes to crush us. And when we're being assaulted like that, you just have to push through. You have to look past that, look beyond that, and focus on what's beyond those things, and preserve hope in that way. Know that there's nothing that's happening to you he's not unaware of. He knows it's happening, and he's allowing it for reasons that he, in his wisdom, understands and knows that you need to go through it, right? Suffering is for our healing, typically. We go through struggles because that is how we are healed. We are rarely healed from things going our way, right? We get healed by having to endure sufferings. That's why it's so prominent in the Christian life and why we embrace it. We embrace suffering. In fact, through fasting and other asceticism, we take it on voluntarily, right? So the reason for this is because we understand the value in the suffering. And so it's a matter of shifting your attitude. Attitude is everything, right? That used to be a phrase that we grew up with, and I don't know if it's still used, but it really is true. Disposition. You take rain, for example, right? A person that grew up in Arizona, when it rains, they get excited, right? Oh, because they don't ever see the rain, right? In Southern Arizona. But somebody lives up in Seattle, right? It rains, it can be depressing. 54 days straight of rain, so attitude is everything. It's the same factor. It's us. It's our way we translate, right, that stimuli, how we respond to it, that determines how it is for us. So if we can shift orientation away from, oh, this is hard and oh, that is hard, and shift it to this understanding that God has given this to us for our growth, then hopefully it'll change our perspective on it, right? We shift the perspective, we shift the emotional response to that stimulus, to that event or condition. So I say that kind of underlies all of it. Obviously, to be fair, there are people that have a condition, have conditions, that they struggle with things. I'm not saying, oh, just go get on drugs. But, if you're one of those people that your situation is worse than that, just know that that's going to be your state. Like that might be a condition that you carry with you the rest of your life, perhaps. And that's okay. If that's how you're going to affect your salvation through working through that suffering, that's your particular cross. For somebody else, it might be, a temptation to homosexuality or something. I mean, just because we have a temptation to something or just because we have a draw to something doesn't mean that that's the thing we're supposed to do, right? It just means that's our cross to bear. We have to still pursue this elevated life, this life that God calls us to, and pray. Once again, of course, prayer underlies everything. Humility underlies everything. Faith underlies everything, right? You have to be faithful. You have to be humble, and you have to pray all the time. And those are the things that will arm you best against these challenges. And they are challenging. Acknowledge them for what they are. Don't pretend it's not a problem. It is a problem, but not an insurmountable one. That's the difference, right? You don't have to feel good, right? We are not our feelings. Our will, our person is separate from our emotional state, our moods. And that's something I think that we've kind of forgotten, right? In modern culture, we kind of associate who we are with how we feel. That's just not true. That's a lie that we've been sold. And I think first, kind of thing to think about on this, kind of practical side of it, independent of the spiritual side, just understand it's not you. You feel this way, okay. Tomorrow you might feel a different way, right? There's all kinds of factors, biochemical, experiential. There's a lot of factors that go into there, nature and nurture. But what does matter is that we do what we're supposed to do. We live the life, we pursue the life that God calls us to, and we pray for his mercy when we fail, and we get back up, and we keep striving every day.
Thank you, Father.
Okay. Thank you. May the Lord bless.